Welcome to the Agora Papers. I'm your host, Iman Ali, and in today's episode, we're going to tackle a question that's crucial not just to philosophy, but the way we structure our societies. The question is, what does justice really mean? In the world today, we hear a lot about justice, social justice, economic justice, and even perhaps climate justice. But what are we really getting justice right? Or have we lost the essence of what it means to live in a truly just society? So today, just to answer this, we're going to go back to ancient Greece, where one of the greatest thinkers of all time, Plato, he lays the foundation of how we think about justice in politics. For Plato, justice isn't just about politics, laws, or rights. It was about harmony, order, and virtue within both the individual and the state. So today, we're going to wonder, what can Plato teach us today? How does this view of justice relate to the political battles we face? Let's dive into his ideas and see if his wisdom can shed light on how we can move forward in the modern world. Now, just a quick little introduction before we start. I'm Iman Ali. I'm a student at Austin High School. I'm based in Sugar Land, Texas. I started this podcast due to my interest in law and philosophy, and this is something I'm really passionate about. If you have any questions or any recommendations, please put it in the comment section below. Thank you. Now, continuing on to our segment 1. Plato's vision of justice. So, just talking about segment 1, Plato's vision of justice, as I referred before. So, when we just look at philosophers or any writers, we always look at their famous work. So, Plato's most famous work, The Republic, it tackles this question, that of justice that we have right now, head on. He asks, what does it mean to live a just life? But Plato just answers this question in a straightforward way. Instead, he takes us on a journey, constructing an ideal society or a utopia to show us what justice looks like when everything is in its rightful place. For Plato, justice isn't just about fairness or the distribution of wealth. This completely differs from what we see like in some places such as the Communist Manifesto, which we will get to later in other episodes. But Plato, he doesn't just talk about this distribution, he talks about balance. It's to ensure that every and each part of society and each part of the individual soul, it performs the role it was meant to and in harmony with the whole. This balance is very central to his definition of justice. We could see when people like Charles de Montesquieu, they take inspiration from him when, you look at checks and balances or balances of power, or even the United States government when we talk about this. However, Plato divides the society into 3 parts. The rulers, which you could refer to as the philosophers and the kings, the soldiers, and the workers. So he claims that the rulers are the wisest, and those who have knowledge and virtue are going to guide the city, while the soldiers defend the city and maintain its security, and the workers provide the material needs of society. We somewhat see a certain type of hierarchy, but I feel like a hierarchy is unavoidable in any circumstance. And this is here where it gets interesting. Plato argues that justice in society mirrors justice in the soul. Each individual has 3 parts: reason, spirit, and appetite. He states reason should rule, spirit should protect, and the appetite should serve. This completely correlates with his ideology of rulers, soldiers, and workers. Now, when we just look at these parts of the soul, when he talks about these 3 cases, we can also see this when we talk about other expressions of religious forms. For example, the Hindus, they believe they believe their sex came from their gods, where they break it down into Brahmins and the lower sex. That somewhat could take inspiration from those. That is a blend of syncretism that is truly amazing. This functional equality that we see in such as places that promote communism, they still have a hierarchy. Their leaders, their managers, there are other hierarchies. That hierarchy will always exist. However, I believe that these hierarchies are becoming ever expanding, and the wealth injustice and the gap in justice is becoming severely unfair. Now, just moving on to segment 2, just Plato's critique of democracy. Does it work in today's world? This is a key question that we have to answer. Now, just moving on to segment 2, we have to think about Plato's critique of democracy. And the key question we have to ask is, does it work in today's world? Now, this is where Plato's ideas start to hit a little close to home. Because while Plato had an ideal vision for society, he was deeply skeptical of democracy. Why? Because he believed that democracy, at least in its purest form, could lead to chaos, disorder, and ultimately the collapse of society. Plato did, however, believe that every citizen was equipped to make wise decisions about the common good. In fact, he thought most people were driven by their passions and appetites rather than reason. So that kind of refers back to when we're talking about the three roles and the three parts of the soul. He thinks that kings and the people that are philosophers that have the most wisdom are the most important, and they must make the decisions for the people. He warns in the Republic, the democratic man is a lover of freedom but not of virtue. He is like a person who wants to live without discipline. He's saying that even though the common man, or a person like you and me, gets freedom, they don't know whether to make the right decisions. The hands of the right decisions can only be made in matters of the kings or philosophers. So just to put it in other words, Plato saw democracy as a system that could easily degenerate into mob rule, where the majority is swayed by emotion and political desire. Sound familiar? Rather than the pursuit of truth and justice. This is very similar to what we have today. We are mainly focused on pathos. We do not care about what an opponent is saying. We care about how we feel about them, how they look, how our perspective on the media is of them. In our current political climate, it's easy to see how popular movements often sway the masses without true understanding of justice, virtue, or the common good. Again, he wasn't against democracy in a general sense. He just was against a democracy in which every citizen had an equal say, regardless of their wisdom or moral standing. In fact, he believed that only those who were truly educated and virtuous, the philosopher kings, should have the power to govern. And it was wise to have a few to rule than a misguided many to make decisions for the whole society. However, Plato's student Aristotle, which we will cover next time, would later argue that a government should reflect the middle class, because they're more likely to have the education and the stability needed to make decisions that benefit the whole of society. But we have to think about modern relevance. But what about today's world, where the idea of one person, one vote is sacred? Plato's warning seems more relevant than ever as we see populism and polarized politics shaping our governments. Just take this election that we saw. People were divided due to emotion. They weren't divided due to logic, but emotion was the key. Fear-mongering and making the other side criminalized on both sides. Both sides targeted the opponent rather than their policies. Now, could our democracies fall into the same trap Plato foresaw? Now, let's just take a moment to reflect. When we consider that Plato's assertion that justice is about fulfilling one's role in society, in what ways do we see this principle at play in our own community, in our own nation? And are these instances where individuals or groups are not fulfilling their roles, are leading to injustice or imbalance, or is it just our vision? We must reflect that on ourselves. Just to wrap it up, aiming for a conclusion, Plato's vision of justice teaches us that a truly just society is one where order, harmony, and virtue are paramount. Justice is not about equality in the sense of wealth redistribution or creating a utopian equality society. It's about fulfilling our roles and contributing to the whole based on our ability and character. It's about knowing our place and acting accordingly for the benefit of society as a whole. In today's world, where justice is reduced to slogans or government intervention, Plato's ideas challenge us to think more deeply. Are we a society that promotes virtue, or are we enabling vice? Are we letting democracy slip into the hands of those who seek personal gain, or are we truly guided by wisdom? As we move forward, it's important to remember that Plato's lessons on justice, lessons that are still relevant and perhaps more important than ever. As always, thank you for joining me, the Agora Papers. Until next time, stay curious and keep questioning. Final thought-provoking question. How can we, as individuals and as society, strive to embody Plato's visions of justice in our daily lives and in our political systems?